Welcome to Primary Election Night 2026. I'm Richard Nelson, founder and executive director of the Commonwealth Policy Center, coming at you live from the CPC studio. And I'm joined by my colleague and friend, Mike Harmon, former state auditor and state legislator. And we're going to unpack the election results and talk about CPC's involvement and a number of other things tonight.
All those great things. I always feel like, the president's really big into wrestling. I feel like we should say, let's get ready to rumble.
There you go.
But apparently the rumble's already over. Now we're just waiting for the judges.
You joke about that, but I understand that for America's 250th birthday, there's going to be MMA cage fighting somewhere in the vicinity of the White House.
Exactly.
Somewhere in D.C. I think it's going to be
Maybe you and I
should
go up there and volunteer for just a little bit.
I would be willing to do that if there was some kind of CPC fundraising effort involved. Other than that, I don't know if I would.
We should call the president. Okay, maybe not.
I'll put that on your to-do list.
I'll put that on my to-do list. All right.
Very good. Well, Mike, it is good to have you join us. And we do have a lot to talk about on this May 19th election eve as the results are coming in. One of the first things I want to talk about is Commonwealth Policy Center's election resources and the work that we do with the candidates, where we send out questionnaires and we interview them. And of course, you spearheaded that.
Yes,
you were the tip of the spear, and you led the election resource effort. And we've talked about it before, but why don't you, if you could, just refresh for those who are not familiar with that.
Well, there's two things that we do. We send out a little bit earlier our AIP, our agreement in principle, and that just talks about our four foundations. It's just a long paragraph statement of what we believe. That God is number one in our life, that the family is very important. Or pro-life. As a matter of fact, let me just read.
Why don't you do that? That would be good. That'd be really helpful. Then we'll talk about why this is important.
So it says, rights come from God, including the right of life, conscious, and religious freedom. Male and female identity is defined at conception by God, who is also the author of marriage between one man and one woman. From this union springs children, family, and the first economic union, the building block of society. Since God endows us with rights, it is the duty of government to protect such rights, institutions, and fiscal integrity so human beings can live out their calling.
Mike, thank you for reading that.
It's a very good statement.
It's a statement. I had a conversation earlier today with a friend and somebody just getting to know us a little bit better. And this is where there's an intersection of theology and the public arena, where there are some creational truths like why are human beings valuable? Well, because we're made in the image of God. Who defines male and female? It's our Creator. Where does the idea of marriage come from and how is it defined? Well, it's from God. But then also the idea that the purpose of government is to protect and secure our inalienable rights, that comes from the Declaration of Independence, right? That we're made and we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, right? A creational ordinance, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's something our founding fathers understood, where theology or biblical truths informed public life and politics.
And of course, I know you always say that, most people say you're not supposed to talk about religion or politics in mixed company, but we do both.
We do both.
Yes.
But we do it in a way I think that's responsible, and we're going to get back to the candidates outreach project that we had, but it's in a way that we believe that there are moral absolutes, that God defines reality, male and female and marriage. And part of this discussion, though, is the church. Christians who are living according to the faith, of course, they're trying to live their lives and raise their families according to the faith, but also they take their biblical values with them when they go to the voting booth as well.
Oh, definitely.
Right? When the legislature's in session, they will call or they will lobby based on those biblical truths. And you could say that we are lobbyists, if you will, for the conservative cause, for the conservative Christian community, but really trying to work for those truths and then to do it in a careful, thoughtful way. This is a long way of addressing separation of church and state or religion and politics. As you were saying, we don't talk about them in polite company. Well, we do. Right? Yeah. Because it's important. It's important that we get it right.
And we do more than lobbying. We do the trainings, and we thought we did quite a few of those. You moderated several of the forums so that the public can know where these candidates stand.
One of the things that you did is you led Commonwealth Policy Center's election resource effort. You talked about sending out the agreement in principle
And then you and
to
I
all the
worked
candidates.
worked together to develop the questions, and we sent out questions.
So the
Uh,
questionnaire went out to
questionnaire
tell
went
us
out.
about how many people that those resources went out to, the
Sure, sure.
candidates.
Well, in the primary, for the state house and the state senate, I think there was five Republican primaries, and then I think if I remember correctly, I think in the House there was about 20
Mhm.
Republican primaries. So we sent those out. We also sent out a slightly different questionnaire, but we also sent out questionnaires to our Senate candidates and or federal Senate candidates
Mhm.
as well as all the congressional candidates. And so it was really good. I mean, we had a very good turnout where sometimes you have to prod them,
Yeah.
but we had a very good turnout of people that responded, both
Yeah.
signing the AIP, agreeing to the
Yeah.
principles that we talked about, as well as, submitting the questionnaires. And so it was really good.
It was a good response rate. It created a good resource, which that is posted on our website, by the way. If you go to
Yes.
commonwealthpolicycenter.org, you can find our candidate comparisons.
Yes.
You'll also find links to the candidate forums that both Mike and I had moderated. But tell us about those interviews, if you
Yeah, I
would.
mean, the interviews went really well. We talked a lot of things. As a matter of fact, some of the interviews we did even before we did the questionnaires, because
Mhm.
one of the things we wanted to do, since this applied to the state house and the state senate, they were in session this year, so
Mhm.
we wanted to make sure we wait till, I don't want to say the last minute, but close to it, so we could see if there was any issues that were relevant in the state house and the state senate that we would want to address in the questionnaire. And the other thing we talked about, we did send out questionnaires. Now, the questions that we put on the candidate comparisons we actually post and mail, they're kind of a distilled version of that, but just because we couldn't put every single thing on, whether it was online. But the other thing we do, it wasn't just based on the questionnaire, and it wasn't just based on the whether they signed the agreement in principle. We also, if they had a voting record, we tried to look at the voting record if possible. If we had a situation where one of our congressional candidates participated in a candidate forum, and we were able to see some of the issues that were involved with that and put that, in the candidate comparison that we put out as well. So there's a lot of things that went into it. So
So a lot of different ways that candidates responded
yes,
and different ways that we got to know the candidates. And this, just so you're aware, there's a lot of work, is what we're saying here. A lot of
yes,
work to set up the interviews, to send out the questionnaires, to
to bug
prod them,
to bug
right,
them, to
bug
bug
them,
them.
get them to
Please
respond.
send that in, or we'll have to put no
And
response.
then the layout, know that the whole CPC team came together to do various aspects of
Yes,
this, but even putting together the final comparison
yes.
using Adobe and doing the layout, which it turned out well. It
Yeah.
was a good
But that
resource.
wasn't you or I that did the layouts.
So it's the younger people
The
get
younger
around with
people
the
that know how to
digital
get
technology.
around with digital things.
That's right. But again, we do have those resources on the CPC
Yes.
website. Go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org and you can find out more about the candidates through their questionnaires and the comparison, and then also the forums as well. Mike, I want to move into another segment here about candidate qualities.
Yeah.
What makes a good candidate? What do we look for at CPC in a good candidate? And I want to go back to your experience running
Sure.
for the state house. You were involved with a number of races there and then also state auditor, and share some of your observations of good qualities and then maybe not so good qualities.
Right.
Let's start with the good.
Well,
What were some of the qualities you saw either in yourself or in other people
yeah,
that you learned
I
along the
mean,
way?
I think both for the state house and then for when I was auditor. Of course, I ran and lost the first two times I ran for the house, but when I won, I ended up going to Washington D.C. and God kind of laid on my heart kind of a mission statement. This is kind of how I look at candidates. Well, and my mission statement was, I have no desire to leave a legacy
Mhm.
except that I serve my Lord, I serve my family, and I serve my country well. And so that's kind of what you look at a candidate. First of all, you want to know, if they love the Lord, if they have a biblical worldview, that's important to
Mhm.
me. And then we want to see how they treat their family. And then, lastly, we want somebody that loves this country. And it should be in that order. I mean, I think I told you the story the last time that long before I got involved with politics, I was living in Lexington. My wife and I were living in Lexington. And while I was at work, a pastor stopped by and he was running for some office. I don't even remember what it was.
Mhm.
He asked my wife if he could put up a sign. He said, well, my husband's kind of particular. And so why don't you leave your sign, leave your number, and I'll have him call you. And he agrees with your beliefs, then we'll go ahead and do it. So I did it, and I called him, and and one of the things so near and to me, dear to me, and one of the main things that got me involved was the pro life issue. And so I said,
Yeah.
what do you think about the pro life issue? An innocent unborn. He's like, well, and this was a pastor, and he was like, well, I think that's between, a woman and her doctor and her God. And I was like, well, I appreciate your time, but sorry, come get your sign. It's not going to go. So we have to be careful because just because someone has a label across their face, whether it's pastor or whether it's, whatever, we need to dig deeper to make sure that they have the same qualities and the characteristics that we want. Now, if you got two candidates and neither one of them has all the qualities you want, then you got to look and see, what's the best quality, or as I did sometimes, you just have to run, So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's what you did.
yeah,
But how about the approach? The one thing to have a principle, one thing to say, I believe in this,
right.
I believe in that. And maybe they line up with us, but does that necessarily guarantee that CPC could get behind these people?
Doesn't necessarily guarantee because there are some things, we have certain core beliefs as well.
Yeah.
And if there's one or the other that is, off or whatever, we may like them. We may even, wish them well. But sometimes if they don't line up, we just, of course, we don't endorse in the primary anyway. We
That's right.
talked about that. But then the general,
Yeah.
we do look more into
Thank you for
that.
mentioning that.
Yeah.
That is important that people know that we provide resources in the primary,
Yes.
the comparison, the
Yeah.
forums, other things. We've done the interviews and the vetting, and of course, we have our own opinions as
Right.
to who we think would be the better candidate.
Yes.
But we don't do endorsements.
Right.
What I was getting to, though, as far as other things to look at. So, for example, Mike, if somebody lined up with CPC or the conservative community in
Right.
general on all of the issues, if they held all of the right positions on the issues, but if that candidate came out of the gate with a smear campaign,
Right.
or if they're making up falsehoods or slandering or not conducting themselves well, which
Yeah.
that does, unfortunately, that
Yeah, unfortunately,
happens
that
from
does
time to
happen.
time,
Yes.
but we wouldn't get involved with something like
Yeah,
that.
we wouldn't get involved with the smear campaign.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. It is important to us, and I'm pressing on that because it is so important to us that candidates conduct themselves with integrity, that they engage the conversations with respect. They can be firm on their principles and push forward a firm argument, but there are certain lines that we expect them not to cross
Right.
when it comes to engaging.
And we hold ourselves to that same accountability because, we don't want our candidate comparison ever to be looked at as a smear or
That's
whatever,
right.
because that's why we make sure we give them every opportunity to fill out the questionnaire, every opportunity to sign the AAP, every opportunity to interview and explain if there is some variance. And then we just report what they have said, either in public or
Mike,
in the questionnaires.
now, Mike, there are a number of groups involved tonight. I want to move to the next segment, and we're going to talk about the different organizations. Now, in the last, since 2010, so 16 years, 2010 was the Citizens United ruling,
Mhm.
which allowed the rise of the super PACs. So we see many of these independent expenditure PACs. They're not authorized by any candidate or campaign. These PACs are allowed to raise money from corporations or individuals where there's unlimited funding, unlimited donations, where the names of the donors are shielded, and really a lot of money can be poured into a campaign. Many of these PACs are run negative campaigns. Some are positive. They can be
Right.
positives. One of the candidates that they're getting behind is Kim Banta. I saw one of the mailers that they helped to fund, and they tend to get behind candidates who are not social conservatives. Kim Banta, I think, is a fiscal conservative. She's for education reform and accountability. But they, in particular, this election and then last election, they got behind a number of moderate candidates. And I think that's one thing that we'll look at tonight is their involvement and what kind of impact they
Right.
have on the races that they engage. The other thing I mentioned, Kentucky Right to Life endorsements, they did endorse in ways that maybe was a surprise to some.
Right.
Daniel Cameron for the U.S. Senate was endorsed by them. Andy Barr was recommended. But then there were some House and Senate races where they either didn't mention candidates or they didn't endorse, and it was in rubric. So we'll take a look at that tonight as well
Sure.
to see how those endorsements fared. And then I mentioned Americans for Prosperity. They are doing door-to-door campaigning across the state also. Well, here's from your experience, Mike, this is the question. What kind of impact do outside groups have, let's say a state house race? 'Cause that's
Sure.
what you've got
Yeah.
experience with.
Yeah. That and the authors race. And, but
Mhm,
from the standpoint outside groups, I always said, for me personally, I always said, if you don't go negative or your associates or affiliates or people that are affiliating themselves with you don't go negative, then I won't go
mhm,
negative. And even if you do, I'm always a little bit cautious on the type neg. You never want to get into anything personal. It's just, if you go negative, it's something they've said or something, they did
mhm,
politically or, yeah, I had one time somebody, a fellow was running against me. He had never served, and they had a postcard they sent to my mom. And I think I may have got it too, but it had me all F's,
mhm,
and then had my opponent who had never served all A's. And my mom just said, well, that just means it's fine and dandy. And sometimes the negative will work. A lot of times, especially if it's dumped right on the end, tends to backfire.
yeah,
With my personal experience, like the experience when I was auditor. Of course, this was my opponent's own ad that had me in a private jet and flying around and everything, and accusing me of all sorts of stuff. But they made the mistake of having a pretty flight attendant serve me an alcoholic beverage. And of course, I was a teetotaler, and everybody knew it, so it made my Republican, and I had a lot of Democrat friends too, so it made them mad. But it also elevated my name because a lot of people saw it. Most people knew it was a hit piece, but a lot of
yeah,
people saw it and they were like, "Hey, Mike, saw your ad, looked real good."
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and we often do see where negative advertising can backfire,
right,
where
right,
when people know the character of a candidate, when they
yeah,
know that person personally, or they just know their reputation and say, this is ridiculous. The person who's running the negative ad, they're the ones that lose believability. They're the ones
right,
that are going to really repel voters.
yeah.
And you saw that happen up close and personal,
Oh,
the
very
auditor's
much.
race, and
Yes,
you
sir.
won by a pretty good margin with a very small amount of money, which that's the next thing I want to go to. How much impact does money have in an election?
In a primary, probably a whole lot, because the joke I always said, I ran
Mm,
25 years in a
mm,
row, served 21 years in a row, but never won a Republican primary. But in a general election, because really most of the races I ran for is like, hey, Richard, you want to run? No, I don't run. You want to run? I don't run. Let's go get Mikey. He'll run.
mhm,
But, God was with us, and we
mhm.
had some good victories.
Yeah,
But it's one of those things where you need money to get your message out.
yeah,
But if you don't have a ton of money, then you just got to work your butt off and get out there and talk to as many people as you can and do as much. And sometimes when you get that synergy, especially in a general election, when the oceans are moving your way, when it comes to, Republicans are
yeah.
doing better, sometimes you can catch the way. But now in that same race that I won in 2015, where I had 45,000 going up against the incumbent Adam Edlin, who had 800,000, and still was able to win. God bless us. You also had a situation where Whitney Westerfield was running for attorney general, and he lost by was
2000, 2000
2,000
votes. Yeah.
votes, give or take.
Mhm.
And so, and that, politics is a game of inches. I mean, if you think about, if Whitney had won that particular race, then Andy Bashir would have never been attorney general. If he had never been attorney general, would he had still been as likely to run and win governor? You never
Yeah.
know.
That's a good point. So
Yeah.
money is important to get out your message, but it's not everything. I'm reminded of several Republican primaries last election in 2024 where whole bunches of money was raised towards moderate Republicans to unseat
Right.
conservative incumbents. And in one case, for example, Mike, there was a incumbent Republican who had about $400,000. The person who beat him had $40,000. It
Yep.
was a 10-to-1 fundraising advantage.
Yep.
And the conservative candidate that had a small amount of money comparatively actually won by a 72 to 26%
Yeah.
margin, something like that. Money is not everything. You need to be right on the issues.
Mhm.
You need to be right with your constituency. Are you
Sure.
in line with where your constituents are? Are you a person of integrity? So, very good. Mike, do you have any predictions? We're going to pivot over to election returns. We've got
Yes.
them coming in. Do you have any? Actually, before we go into the projections, Donald Trump endorsed a number of candidates. He
Yes.
endorsed Thomas Massey, congressman of the 4th District, that's Northern Kentucky, introduced his opponent. He also introduced Andy Barr, and those were two of the major endorsements. And then Ralph Alvarado. Those were three endorsements that I'm aware of in Kentucky.
Now he endorsed some more, but those were the ones because he went ahead and endorsed James Comer
Okay, he
first.
did.
Yeah, he did, and Hal Rogers endorsed Hal Rogers and Brett Guthrie. But those were pretty solid or safe seats for the most part. I think from everything that we can see, more than likely that Andy Barr will win. As a matter of fact, as I'm looking right now, it looks like they've already projected Andy Barr to win for the Senate seat. Haven't looked at just yet. I think from the standpoint before I even look at the vote totals, I would say that the fourth district with Thomas Massey is probably very close. But we'll just scroll down here and take a little look, and it looks as if, let's see here, right now it looks as if Ed Galron is ahead 57-43
Okay.
with about 13.3% of the vote. So
Interesting.
depending on where that vote has come in from, could be a big difference because some of the articles that we've seen, Boone County, very supportive, or had a lot of energy in Boone County for Massey. Some of the other counties in there, maybe not as much.
Yeah, that'll be a fascinating race to watch.
Yeah.
It's not just the whole country, but internationally. The international community is watching the Thomas Massey Ed Galrain race because it answers the question, or many people are looking at it through the prism of, can a Republican congressman stand up and vote against the
Right.
president and still maintain their seat?
Yeah.
And of course, it looks like it is, as far as primary congressional spending, it looks like a record high. It's $35 million, I believe was the number that I
It's a
heard
lot. Yeah.
early. 35 million just spent on a primary. So much of it was spent against Thomas Massey.
Yes.
So we will see how that pans out. It looks like it's might be a long night until we get all those
It
numbers
could
in
be a
for that.
long night, especially since all those are tight. But now I do think it's interesting, of course, and I think they're just looking at the trend. And we've talked about this before. It's hard on me because I have so many of my friends running against each other
Yeah.
in all these races. I know Daniel Cameron very well. I know Andy Barr very well. Consider both of them friends. In that sixth congressional seat that we talked about, know Ryan Dotson, and I've known Ralph and his wife for a long, long time. Consider, both of them friends. So it's tough. And of course, Massey, I jokingly said, for all transparency, when I ran that race for auditor and I only had 45,000, Thomas Massey was 1,000 of that 45,000. So for full transparency there. But
There you go.
yeah.
So, Mike, the question tonight is, will Trump's endorsement have an impact on these races? We did see where in Louisiana, where Donald Trump endorsed against a sitting U.S. His name just escaped me,
Yes.
but he lost in the primary just the
Yes.
other day. It wasn't Kennedy, it was
Cassidy,
Cassidy. Thank you.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, and he lost. He ran a distant third
Yes.
in that.
He won't even
Perhaps
be part of the runoff because I think they went to a runoff.
that's
So,
right. It's the top two vote getters in that.
if they don't get 50%, I think.
That is correct. That's right. So we will see. We will see that along with the money game. Much of this has to be done post-election when all the final finance reports come in, and we'll look at the endorsements, which we're aware of some now, but it will be fascinating to see how things shape up. So, Mike, I'm going to we're going to go into the returns.
Yes.
And we've got a couple of different resources here, but
Right.
I'm looking at the WDRB Louisville. This is the Fox affiliate in Louisville.
Yes.
And they are giving returns for the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. Amy McGrath is in the lead right now.
Which was a bit surprising based
This
on
is
the
a bit
polling.
surprising. She's over Charles Booker, 42.9% to 38.1%, but this is only 9% of the votes counted. Charles Booker was way ahead in the polling.
Right.
As of even a week ago,
Yeah.
he was way ahead. Now, Charles Booker is a former state representative. He campaigns on the far left,
Yes.
universal health care.
I think he said from the hood to the holler. Wasn't that his saying?
I think when he ran against, was it Rand Paul?
I think maybe. Yeah.
He ran again for this position before, but from the hood to the holler.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah.
But he's a very gifted speaker,
Yeah.
very passionate, and he does connect with the far left of the Democratic Party. Now,
And to be honest with you, he's a very likable individual. Now, I don't agree with his politics, but he's a very likable individual.
now he was projected to win that. We will see
Yeah.
if the numbers come up. I think it depends on where these numbers are coming from.
Right.
If it's from far eastern Kentucky, the numbers are probably not going to favor him. But when Louisville shows up to vote, Charles Booker is one of the favored sons
Oh,
there,
very much
where
so.
he will carry that Blue City Democratic vote
It would
there.
be very surprising if he did not.
Pam Stevenson is a state house member. She is running a distant third with 6% of the vote. It's interesting because she was the first person to announce that she was going to run for U.S. Senate, and then eventually Charles Booker and Amy McGrath got in. Stay tuned with that. With the Kentucky primary for U.S. Senate, Andy Barr is up 61.1% to Daniel Cameron's 30.8%. And WDRB, this is only 14% of the votes counted, and it looks like they're already calling
Yes.
Andy Barr. It seems to me a little early, but who knows? Only 14% have of the votes have come in.
And things can change, but with 14.4%, it does look like if the trend holds up, he'll not only win but win big.
Yeah, if,
Yeah.
if that's the case, that's
Yeah.
about a 2-to-1,
Yeah.
2-to-1 margin, and something would have to happen. I think I'll add one thing for the U.S. Senate race. Daniel Cameron appears to be very strong in Western Kentucky.
Yes.
And those numbers won't come in for a while yet. It's still only 7:30, so 6:30. The polls had
So,
just closed in Western
right.
Kentucky
And
half hour ago.
if anybody's in line, it takes a while to tabulate it, but also if there's anybody in line, although turnout seemed to be a little low, if they're in line at 7, they can still vote.
Mike, talk about the turnout since you brought that up.
Yeah, I don't know what has happened so far today, but I know Secretary Michael Adams, based on the absentee ballot, has forecast that there'll be about a 20% turnout, which is actually a lot better than when I ran for governor, which there was only 13% of registered Republicans voted, which was kind of sad. I think there might have been just a hair more, but not many more of the Democrats.
But there is a difference between constitutional office election years, they're off-year elections, and the midterms.
Yes.
Midterms generally will have more voter turnout because you've got more people on the ballot from city and county. Every county level race is on the ballot.
But it's also
every
not a presidential year. In the presidential year, you'll have almost double
that's right.
turnout.
So presidential year, you'll have high voter turnout. Midterm, second highest, and then the off-year elections, especially during the primary,
Yes.
being the governor's race and Secretary of State and Attorney General, all those, you had mentioned just 13%, and that was
Yes.
back in 2023.
Yeah.
So very, very low turnout. And friends, many of the elections are being determined in these primaries. Right now, we've got a number of Republicans on the ballot for State House who, if they win their primary, they're going to go into, they will win office because there's not a Democratic challenger. Same on the Democratic side, by the way. There are several Democrats especially in the blue cities, in particular. Whoever wins that Democratic primary will move on to become the next state representative.
Yeah, I think
or state senator.
For state senator, I think after this there is only I think there's only 10 general election races for the Senate, and there is 49 for House. So basically, you'll only have 59 primaries for the state House and the state Senate together, whereas you've got 100 total state representatives, and I guess half of the 38, which would be 19. So you've got 119 opportunities, but there are only actually 59 races involved.